The shrill screech of tires against wet pavement pierced the morning air as Ethan Blackwood's Aston Martin came to an abrupt halt. Coffee splashed across the dashboard, and papers flew everywhere. Through the windshield, he locked eyes with the woman who had darted across the street, the very same woman who now stared back at him with a look of terror slowly morphing into indignation. "Are you out of your mind?" Ethan bellowed, stepping out of his car into the drizzling Seattle rain, his custom Italian suit immediately darkening with moisture. "Do you have any idea how close I came to—" "To what?" "Running me over because you were too busy texting to watch the road?" The woman's voice trembled slightly, but her hazel eyes remained steady as she clutched a worn portfolio to her chest. Her simple floral dress was now splattered with mud from the puddle his car had skidded through. Ethan's jaw clenched. At 37, he wasn't accustomed to being interrupted, especially not by someone who looked like she shopped at discount stores. "I was not texting." He gestured to his car, where his phone sat untouched in its holder. "But perhaps you should invest in glasses before jaywalking through downtown." "This is a crosswalk," she pointed out, gesturing to the faded white lines beneath their feet. A small crowd had gathered, cell phones raised. Perfect. Just what he needed. Another billionaire behaving badly headline for his PR team to manage. "Look, are you hurt?" Ethan asked, forcing a modicum of civility into his tone as rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead. "No, but my portfolio is ruined." She opened the black case to reveal watercolor illustrations now bleeding together in a muddy rainbow. "My interview was in 30 minutes. Something unexpected, guilt perhaps, twisted in Ethan's chest. "What interview?" "Housekeeper position at some rich guy's estate." She sighed, carefully closing the damaged portfolio. "I'm an artist, but bills don't pay themselves. Now I have nothing to show the employment agency." "What's your name?" he asked abruptly. "Olivia. Olivia Winters," she replied, suspicion narrowing her eyes. "And you're Ethan Blackwood?" "Yes, I recognize you from the business magazines my dad used to read." An idea formed in Ethan's mind, one that would solve both his current PR situation and another problem he'd been facing. His household manager had quit last week, citing his impossible standards and temperament as reasons. "Ms. Winters, I'd like to offer you a job." "Excuse me?" Olivia blinked raindrops from her lashes. "The position you were interviewing for? It was at my estate. Consider this your interview." He gestured between them and the growing crowd. "And congratulations, you're hired." "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious about business decisions," he cut her off. "Starting salary is twice whatever the agency quoted. You begin tomorrow." "I didn't accept yet," she protested. Ethan arched an eyebrow, rain streaming down his face. "Would you prefer I call the police to file an accident report instead? For a pedestrian who suddenly appeared in front of my vehicle?" Olivia's cheeks flushed with anger. "That's blackmail. That's negotiation." He retrieved a business card from his wallet and pressed it into her palm. 9 a.m. sharp. The address is on the card. Ask for Mrs. Collins at the gate." With that, he turned back toward his car, then paused to look over his shoulder. "And Ms. Winters? Don't be late. I detest tardiness almost as much as I detest jaywalkers." As Ethan drove away, he glimpsed Olivia in his rearview mirror, standing motionless in the rain, clutching his card like it might bite her. For the first time that day, a genuine smile tugged at his lips. Tomorrow would certainly be interesting. What Ethan couldn't know was that Olivia, staring after his disappearing car, was making a solemn vow to herself. She would take his job offer, but only long enough to save money for art school, and perhaps make the arrogant billionaire's life a little more complicated along the way. The iron gates of Blackwood Manor parted with mechanical precision as Olivia approached, her beat-up Toyota Corolla sputtering in protest at the steep incline of the driveway. The mansion that came into view nearly caused her to slam on the brakes in astonishment. It wasn't a house, it was a modern castle. Glass and steel stretched skyward in elegant angles, with floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the morning sunlight like diamonds. Pristine gardens surrounded the structure, meticulously manicured by what must have been an army of gardeners. "Well, this explains the god complex," Olivia muttered to herself, parking beside a fountain depicting Greek deities. Her watch read 55 a.m. She'd deliberately arrived early to spite Ethan's assumption that she'd be late. A silver-haired woman in an immaculate pantsuit greeted her at the entrance. "Ms. Winters, I presume. I'm Mrs. Collins, Mr. Blackwood's estate manager." "Former estate manager," came a deep voice from behind them. Ethan Blackwood descended a floating staircase, today dressed in casual luxury, a cashmere sweater and tailored pants that probably cost more than Olivia's monthly rent. "Mrs. Collins has been graciously training her replacement. That would be you." Olivia nearly choked. "Excuse me? I thought I was applying for a housekeeper position." "Change of plans. I need someone who can manage the entire household." His eyes traveled over her outfit, a simple blouse and slacks, the nicest she owned. "Your portfolio yesterday showed artistic sensibilities. That suggests an eye for detail." "My portfolio was ruined," Olivia reminded him, irritation rising. "I salvaged a few pieces." From a nearby table he retrieved her paintings, now carefully dried and preserved. "Your work shows talent, raw, undeveloped, but present." Olivia wasn't sure whether to be flattered or insulted. "I can't manage an estate, I have no experience." "Neither did I with running a tech empire at 23, Ethan replied with infuriating confidence. "Yet here we are." Mrs. Collins offered Olivia a sympathetic smile. "Don't worry, dear. I'll teach you everything before my retirement next month." "Next month?" Olivia's voice rose an octave. "Is that a problem?" Ethan challenged, crossing his arms. Olivia thought of her empty bank account, her dream of attending the prestigious Pacific Northwest Art Institute slipping further away with each passing day. The salary he'd mentioned would cover tuition in just 6 months. "No problem at all," she replied with forced cheerfulness. "Where do we start?" The morning passed in a whirlwind as Mrs. Collins led her through the mansion. 12 bedrooms, 15 bathrooms, 3 kitchens, an indoor pool, a gallery, a home theater, and countless other rooms whose purposes seemed purely to showcase wealth. Olivia scribbled notes frantically, trying to memorize the complex staff schedule and Ethan's numerous particularities. "Mr. Blackwood requires his coffee precisely at 6:15 a.m. Single origin Ethiopian black," Mrs. Collins instructed as they entered a kitchen larger than Olivia's entire apartment. "His breakfast is protein-focused, no carbs. He has allergies to strawberries and hazelnuts." "And mediocrity," Ethan added, appearing suddenly in the doorway. "Don't forget my allergy to mediocrity." Olivia turned, startled. "Do you always sneak up on people?" "It's my house. I don't sneak, I arrive." Mrs. Collins tactfully excused herself, leaving them alone in the gleaming kitchen. "Why me?" Olivia asked, unable to contain the question any longer. "You could hire someone qualified, someone who knows which fork goes where at your fancy dinner parties." Ethan approached, stopping uncomfortably close. "Because you stood in the rain yesterday and looked me in the eye when most people would have been intimidated. Because you need this job more than you're willing to admit." His voice dropped. "And because I suspect having you around will be interesting." The way he said interesting sent an unwelcome shiver down Olivia's spine. "I'm not here to entertain you," she replied coolly. "No," Ethan agreed, a smile playing at the corner of his lips. "You're here to run my household, starting with the charity gala I'm hosting this Saturday." "This Saturday?" Olivia's eyes widened. In panic. "That's in 5 days." "5 days is plenty of time," he said dismissively. "Unless you're not up to the challenge?" Olivia squared her shoulders. "I'll manage your gala, Mr. Blackwood, and it will be the best event this house has ever seen." As Ethan walked away, Olivia noticed the subtle smirk on his face and realized too late. He'd baited her, and she'd taken it hook, line, and sinker. What she didn't see was the genuine curiosity in Ethan's eyes as he glanced back at her from the doorway, or the way Mrs. Collins observed them both with knowing amusement. The wheels were already in motion for something neither of them had anticipated. The night of the charity gala arrived with a sky full of stars, and Olivia's nerves stretched to their breaking point. For 5 days, she had worked tirelessly, coordinating with caterers, florists, musicians, and the endless parade of vendors necessary for an event of this magnitude. Mrs. Collins had been a godsend, but Ethan had been suspiciously absent, leaving Olivia to wonder if this entire ordeal was some elaborate test. Now, hidden away in a small office adjacent to the grand ballroom, Olivia assessed her reflection in a compact mirror. The royal blue gown she wore, borrowed from Mrs. Collins's daughter, transformed her in ways she hadn't expected. For once, she looked like she belonged in these opulent surroundings. "Ms. Winters?" A staff member poked their head in. "Mr. Blackwood is asking for you." Taking a deep breath, Olivia stepped into the ballroom, immediately overwhelmed by the result of her labor. The space glowed with thousands of tiny lights meant to mimic the night sky, while centerpieces featuring local artist sculptures adorned each table, her personal touch that had almost caused a mutiny from the event planner. She spotted Ethan immediately. How could she not? He stood, head and shoulders above most guests, resplendent in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, commanding attention without effort. When his eyes found hers, something shifted in his expression. "Olivia," he said, approaching her with 2 champagne flutes, "you've outdone yourself." "Is that actual praise from the great Ethan Blackwood?" She accepted the champagne with a hint of a smile. "I should record this historic moment. Don't get used to it." But there was no bite to his words. Though I must admit, incorporating local artists was inspired. "That was the point," Olivia replied. "A charity gala for arts education should actually showcase art." Ethan's gaze lingered on her face. "You look different tonight." "It's called makeup, Mr. Blackwood." "No," he shook his head. "It's confidence. It suits you." Before Olivia could respond, Seattle's mayor approached, pulling Ethan into conversation. Throughout the evening, Olivia flitted from crisis to crisis. A spilled drink here, a misplaced placecard there. Always aware of Ethan's presence across the room, occasionally catching his eyes on her. It was nearly midnight when disaster struck. The dessert chef approached Olivia in panic. They'd accidentally included hazelnut in the chocolate soufflés already being served. "Stop the service immediately," Olivia commanded, rushing through the crowd to find Ethan deep in conversation with potential investors. Without thinking, she snatched the spoon from his hand just as it hovered above the deadly dessert. "What on earth?" Ethan began. "Hazelnuts," she whispered urgently. "There's been a mistake in the kitchen." The investors chuckled, but Ethan's expression was unreadable as he excused himself, guiding Olivia to a private terrace with a firm hand on the small of her back. "You remembered," he said simply, the moonlight casting shadows across his chiseled features. "Of course I remembered. It's my job to keep you alive, apparently." She attempted levity, but her voice trembled slightly from the adrenaline. "Is that the only reason you care if I live or die?" His voice had dropped to a dangerous timbre that made her heart race. "I don't care," Olivia lied, hyper-aware of his proximity. "I just need this job until I save enough for art school." "Art? School?" Ethan's brow furrowed. "You never mentioned that." "You never asked," she countered softly. The revelation hung between them, shifting the atmosphere. Ethan moved closer, his hand still resting on her back. "5 days," he murmured. "5 days, and you've reorganized my staff, charmed my most difficult business associates, and now saved me from anaphylactic shock. Who are you, Olivia Winters?" "Just a girl standing in front of a billionaire, asking him not to fire her for manhandling his dessert," she quipped, though her humor barely masked her nervousness. To her astonishment, Ethan laughed, a genuine, rich sound she'd never heard from him before. "I'm beginning to think hiring you was the smartest business decision I've made all year." "Only beginning to think?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. Their banter was interrupted by the sound of fireworks, the surprise finale she'd arranged. As they both turned to watch the display, Ethan's hand found hers in the darkness. "I have a proposition," he said, eyes fixed on the bursting colors above. "Stay on as my estate manager, and I'll fund your art school." Olivia turned to him in shock. "That's not charity I'm looking for." "It's not charity," Ethan replied, finally meeting her gaze. "It's investment in talent." A beat passed. "And perhaps in something more if you're amenable." The implication was clear, hanging between them like the fading embers of the fireworks. "I don't mix business with pleasure," Olivia whispered, though she made no move to pull her hand from his. "Then quit," Ethan suggested, his face inches from hers now, effective immediately. "You're impossible," she breathed, but the words held no malice. "I prefer the term determined," he countered, and then his lips were on hers, tasting of champagne and possibility. When they parted, Olivia's practical side made one last stand. "This is insane. We barely know each other." "Sometimes," Ethan said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with unexpected tenderness, "the best investments are the ones that seem the riskiest at first glance." 6 months later, Olivia's art hung in a prestigious gallery downtown, while she split her time between art school and a certain billionaire's estate, no longer as his employee, but as the woman who had taught Seattle's most infamous bachelor that true wealth wasn't measured in stock portfolios, but in moments of genuine connection. And Ethan Blackwood, for his part, had learned that the most valuable mergers weren't always the ones that took place in boardrooms. Sometimes they happened on rainy crosswalks, in moonlit gardens, and in the quiet moments between two people who had found in each other the missing pieces they hadn't known they were searching for.
Lily Harper tightened her grip on her suitcase as she stood before the towering gates of the Whitman estate. The sprawling mansion, framed by immaculate gardens, exuded an air of cold elegance. It was her first day as a private nurse, hired to care for Edward Whitman, a once renowned author who had fallen into a deep coma following a devastating accident. The gates creaked open with a mechanical hum, revealing a winding driveway lined with towering oaks. As Lily walked towards the entrance, her heart pounded, not with fear, but with determination. This wasn't just another assignment. It was an opportunity to make a real difference. The front door swung open, revealing Richard, the butler, whose demeanor was as severe as the mansion's grandeur. "Miss Harper," he said with a curt nod. "Mrs. Whitman is waiting for you in the study." Lily followed him through halls adorned with priceless artwork, each piece exuding the wealth and sophistication of a bygone era. When they reached the study, Charlotte Whitman stood waiting, a statuesque woman with icy eyes and an air of quiet authority. "I hope you understand the magnitude of your responsibility," Charlotte said, her voice as sharp as the lines of her tailored dress. "My husband requires constant care, and any negligence will not be tolerated." "Yes, Mrs. Whitman," Lily replied with quiet confidence. "I assure you I will give him my very best." The door to Edward Whitman's room creaked open, and Lily Harper took her first step into the space that would become her world. The room was vast, yet oppressively clinical, dominated by the hum of medical devices. Edward lay motionless in a specialized bed, his features still and pale, a shadow of the vibrant author whose photos adorned the walls. Lily placed her suitcase down and approached the bed. For a moment she stood silently, studying the man before her. Edward was in his late 40s, with streaks of silver in his dark hair and the faint traces of a life once full of passion and creativity etched into his face. Richard, the butler, cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitman was always deeply involved in his work," he explained, his tone softening. "He wrote tirelessly, often inspired by the scent of lavender from his garden or the sound of classical music." Lily nodded, filing away this information. "Thank you, Richard. I'll take it from here." That evening, as the mansion settled into an eerie quiet, Lily began to create a plan. She reviewed Edward's medical records and noted his stagnant progress. Her instincts told her that traditional methods wouldn't be enough. She would need to engage more than his body. She would need to reach his mind. The next morning, Lily began her unorthodox approach. She filled the room with the scent of lavender, a fragrance she had learned Edward cherished during his writing sessions. Then she set up a small speaker and played a selection of classical music, Mozart, Bach, and Edward's favorite, Beethoven. "Good morning, Mr. Whitman," she said, pulling back the heavy curtains to let in sunlight. "It's a beautiful day. Let's get started." As she worked through her routine, she spoke to Edward as if he could hear her. She shared stories from her own life, her childhood on a farm, her decision to become a nurse after caring for her grandmother. "You might be wondering why I'm talking so much," she said with a soft laugh, "but I believe every word and sound is a bridge. Maybe one day, you'll cross it back to us." Days turned into weeks, and small changes began to emerge. During one session, as Lily played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, she noticed a subtle flicker in Edward's eyelids. Another day, when the sun poured into the room, she swore she saw his fingers twitch. Encouraged, Lily expanded her efforts. She rearranged the room to make it less sterile, adding books and photographs that once inspired Edward's stories. A framed picture of Edward sitting with a sleek black cat on his lap caught her attention. She showed it to Richard. "That's Moon," Richard said, his usually stoic face softening. "Mr. Whitman's cat." They were inseparable. After the accident, Mrs. Whitman sent Moon to the summer house. She said the cat was a distraction. Lily's mind raced. "Do you think we could bring Moon back?" Richard hesitated, glancing down the hall as if expecting Charlotte to appear. "I believe it's possible," he said at last. "Mrs. Whitman rarely goes to the summer house. I'll make some inquiries." That night, Lily couldn't sleep. The thought of Mun reuniting with Edward gave her hope, a chance to spark a deeper connection. "We're going to bring you back," she whispered to Edward, one step at a time. As the moonlight bathed the mansion in a silvery glow, Lily felt a spark of determination. The afternoon sun poured into Edward's room, casting golden rays across the polished wood floors. Lily Harper stood by the window, her heart racing in anticipation. Today was the day Mun would return. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Richard entered, holding a sleek black cat with piercing green eyes in his arms. Mun gazed around the room cautiously, his tail flicking with curiosity. As soon as Richard set Mun down, the cat leapt onto the bed with the grace of a dancer. He sniffed Edward's hand, then settled by his side, curling up as though no time had passed since their last moment together. Lily held her breath, her eyes fixed on Edward's motionless form. For weeks, she had studied every twitch, every flicker, searching for signs of connection. And then it happened. Edward's fingers moved, faintly but unmistakably, towards Mun. His heart monitor beeped slightly faster, the first significant change in weeks. Lily clutched the edge of the bed, tears welling in her eyes. "Richard," she whispered, barely able to contain her emotion. "Look at this." The normally stoic butler stepped closer, his jaw tightening as he observed the scene. "Mr. Whitman always said Mun brought him peace," he murmured. "It seems he still does." As the hours passed, Mun remained by Edward's side, purring softly. The steady rhythm seemed to echo in harmony with Edward's faint movements. Later that evening, Charlotte appeared in the doorway, her gaze icy but her steps hesitant. "What is that cat doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp but laced with a hint of unease, as though unsure whether to reprimand or accept what she was witnessing. Lily stood her ground. "Lily is helping him." Edward responded to his presence, more than he has to anything else so far. Charlotte's lips thinned, her eyes narrowing as she looked between Edward and Mun. For a moment, her mask of indifference slipped, and something raw flickered across her face. She turned abruptly, muttering, "We'll see if it makes any difference." Despite Charlotte's dismissal, Lily's resolve only deepened. That night, she documented every detail. The subtle movement of Edward's fingers, the change in his vital signs, and the calming effect of Mun's presence. Before leaving the room, Lily gently stroked Mun's silky fur. "You're part of this journey now, Mun," she whispered. "Together, we're going to bring him back." As she glanced back at Edward's still form, Lily saw something she hadn't noticed before. A faint flicker of peace on his face, as though a part of him recognized that he wasn't alone anymore. The morning air was crisp and filled with the scent of pine as the car rolled to a stop in front of the small wooden cabin. This was Edward Whitman's writing retreat, the place where he had penned some of his most celebrated novels. For months, it had remained untouched, a relic of the past. Lily Harper climbed out of the vehicle, taking a deep breath. Behind her, Richard and two medical assistants carefully unloaded Edward, who lay in a transportable chair. His eyes remained closed, his body still, but Lily felt certain this trip would awaken something within him. "Are you sure about this?" Richard asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Yes," Lily replied firmly. "If anything can reach him, it's this place." They wheeled Edward into the cabin, and Lily immediately set to work recreating the environment that had once inspired him. She opened the windows to let in the fresh mountain air and arranged familiar objects on the desk. His favorite pen, a stack of old notebooks, and a framed photo of Mun curled up on the windowsill. Mun, who had accompanied them on the trip, leapt gracefully onto the desk, his green eyes fixed on Edward, as though silently urging him to awaken. He settled beside the photo, his purring growing louder, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo Edward's faint breaths, bridging the gap between past and present. "Edward," Lily said softly, kneeling beside his chair, "we're here. This is where you created your magic. Can you feel it?" She began playing a recording of a Beethoven sonata, the notes filling the cabin with a haunting beauty. As the music swelled, something extraordinary happened. Edward's eyelids fluttered, and his lips moved faintly. Charlotte, who had reluctantly agreed to accompany them, gasped. "Lily, look!" she exclaimed, stepping closer. Edward's lips parted, and a single, faint word emerged. "Charlotte." The room fell silent, the weight of that one word pressing upon them all. Charlotte sank to her knees beside Edward, her icy composure shattering like glass under the weight of his whispered word. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched his hand tightly, her voice breaking with emotion. "I'm here, Edward," she whispered, her fingers trembling against his. "I'm so sorry for all the time I wasted, But I'm here now. I promise I won't leave you again." Encouraged by the breakthrough, Lily continued speaking to him. She described the cabin, the sunlight streaming through the windows, and the scent of pine in the air. Slowly, Edward's hand twitched, his fingers curling slightly around Charlotte's. Munn stretched lazily on the desk, his purring a steady, soothing rhythm. It was as though the cat knew his presence was part of Edward's awakening. "Do you remember this place?" Charlotte asked, her voice trembling. "The summers we spent here, the nights you stayed up writing while I read by the fire?" A tear slipped from Edward's eye, and his lips moved again, though the words were faint. Charlotte leaned closer, her heart breaking and healing all at once as she caught fragments of his whisper. Memories of their time together, moments long buried, but now stirring back to life. Lily stepped back, giving them space. She watched as Charlotte's hand never left Edward's, her expression filled with something Lily hadn't seen before. Unguarded love. That evening, as they prepared to leave, Lily took one last look at the cabin. She knew this day marked a turning point, not just in Edward's recovery, but in the Whitmans' relationship. The cracks in their marriage, once hidden beneath layers of bitterness, were beginning to heal. When they returned to the mansion, Edward's progress continued. He began responding more clearly, his fingers moving deliberately, his lips forming words with growing strength. Charlotte stayed by his side, no longer the detached figure she once was. Munn, ever faithful, curled up on Edward's bed each night, his presence a constant source of comfort and connection. For the first time, Lily allowed herself to believe fully in the impossible. Edward Whitman was coming back, not just to his family, but to the life he had once built, and to the man he used to be. The Whitman estate had transformed. Where there was once an air of despair, now there was life, light, and possibility. Edward Whitman, though not yet fully recovered, sat upright in his wheelchair, his eyes clear and alert as Charlotte read aloud from one of his favorite books. Munn curled contentedly at his feet, purring softly. Lily Harper stood by the window, watching the scene with quiet pride. Edward could now speak in short sentences and had even started writing simple notes, a monumental achievement for someone who, months earlier, was thought to be unreachable. His recovery was not just physical, but emotional, reconnecting him with his wife and the world he loved. "You've worked wonders here," Charlotte said, glancing at Lily with a rare, genuine smile. "I don't know how we can ever thank you." Lily shook her head. "This was never just my work. It was Edward's strength, your love, and Munn's unwavering presence. I was just part of the team." Inspired by Edward's progress, the Whitmans and Lily decided to establish the Whitman Foundation for Creative Recovery, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping artists and writers heal from trauma. The first official meeting of the foundation was held in Edward's study. As the plans unfolded, Edward's voice, though still soft, carried determination. "This is our chance to give back, to bring hope to others the way you all brought it to me." As Lily left the mansion that evening, she glanced back at the warm glow of the lights and thought about the journey they had taken together. Edward wasn't the only one transformed. They all were. Lily found a new purpose in her life, Charlotte rediscovered the love she thought was lost, and Edward reclaimed his voice and creativity. Together, they proved that, even in the face of despair, hope and connection could bring about miracles. In the shimmering heart of San Francisco, where skyscrapers kissed the foggy sky, William Royce lived a life most could only dream of. A tech visionary in his late 30s, William was the man behind Royce Innovations, a groundbreaking company that had revolutionized artificial intelligence. To the world, he was a symbol of success, brilliant, driven, and untouchable. But beneath the polished surface of his life lay an emptiness he could no longer ignore. He just days away from his grand wedding to Isabella Hart, a supermodel and media darling. William believed he had finally found the missing piece of his perfect life. Isabella was everything society deemed enviable, stunning, poised, and adored by millions. Yet William's heart longed for something deeper, though he couldn't quite define what it was. The story takes a sharp turn one fateful evening, when William's world crumbles in a way he never anticipated. While driving past a luxury hotel, his eyes lock onto a sight that sends a cold shiver down his spine. Isabella, his fiancée, passionately embracing another man. The betrayal cuts him deeply, unraveling the carefully constructed narrative of his seemingly ideal life. As the sun sets over the bay, William stands at a crossroads. He is no longer the calm, calculated innovator the world admires. Instead, he is a man consumed by hurt and anger, silently vowing to turn the pain into a cold, calculated revenge. The city lights blurred as William Royce sat frozen in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Outside the grand facade of a luxury hotel, the scene before him played out like a cruel twist in one of the dramas Isabella adored. She was there, draped in a crimson evening gown that accentuated her ethereal beauty, her every movement exuding the grace of someone who had always been admired. But tonight, her elegance was shared with someone else. A tall, impeccably dressed man who held her in an embrace far too intimate to be mistaken. William's chest tightened as he watched the man lean in, his lips meeting Isabella's with a tenderness that should have been reserved for him. The weight of the betrayal hit like a punch to the gut, shattering William's carefully curated sense of control. He had worked tirelessly for decades, building a tech empire that defined progress, influence, and power. Yet, in this moment, none of it mattered. The woman he trusted, the one he was days away from marrying, had desecrated the sanctuary of their relationship. Inside the car, William's mind raced, shifting between disbelief and searing anger. How could she, he thought, his breathing shallow as the scene replayed in his mind. He had given her everything, his time, his devotion, and a place in his meticulously crafted world. Now, all he felt was a gnawing emptiness. As the couple disappeared into the hotel, William finally exhaled, his breath shaky and his pulse pounding. He leaned back, closing his eyes briefly, forcing himself to think. His jaw clenched as he made a silent vow. If you think you can humiliate me, Isabella, you're mistaken. This isn't over. When William drove away from the hotel, his thoughts were no longer plagued by sorrow, but fueled by a cold determination. Beneath the glittering skyline of San Francisco, he began to plot a revenge that would strike at the very core of her pride. The soft chime of a bell echoed through the cozy coffee shop as Emma Clark wiped down the counter with practiced efficiency. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, blending with the faint hum of conversation from the few customers scattered around. Emma, a barista in her late 20s, carried herself with quiet poise. Her wavy brown hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her hazel eyes sparkled with warmth despite the long hours she worked each day. Emma's life was far from glamorous. After her parents passed away, she inherited their small home and a mountain of debt. She had spent years juggling multiple jobs to keep her head above water, but she never let her hardships dampen her spirit. Her modest dreams of stability and a life filled with small joys were what kept her going. For William Royce, Emma was an unnoticed constant. He often stopped by the coffee shop for his usual black coffee, his presence marked by the sleek suit and air of authority that surrounded him. To her, he was just another customer, albeit one whose demeanor spoke of wealth and power. Today, however, William's visit was different. He lingered at the counter longer than usual, his sharp blue eyes studying Emma as though seeing her for the first time. She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the subtle crease in his brow that hinted at something weighing on his mind. "Emma, isn't it?" William finally asked, his deep voice breaking the silence between them. "Yes, that's right," she replied with a polite smile, though her brow furrowed slightly in curiosity. William rarely spoke more than a few words during his visits. "I need your help," he said abruptly, his tone serious. The weight of his gaze made Emma pause, the cleaning cloth still in her hand. "My help?" she echoed, uncertain. "With what, exactly?" William hesitated for a moment, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I'd like you to join me for dinner tomorrow night. I'll explain everything then." Emma blinked, stunned. This wasn't just unexpected. It felt like the opening act of a story she couldn't yet comprehend. The next evening, Emma Clark stood in front of the mirror in her modest apartment, staring at her reflection with a mix of disbelief and nervousness. She had spent most of the day debating whether to go. The offer from William Royce, the enigmatic billionaire she barely knew, seemed almost surreal. Why would someone like him invite her, a coffee shop barista, to dinner? What could he possibly want? She had initially declined, but William's persistence had been as surprising as it was convincing. "I promise you won't regret it," he had said with a tone of finality, leaving her no room for further argument. Now, as the hour approached, her nerves were in overdrive. Wearing a simple black dress she had owned for years, Emma decided she would go, not out of curiosity, but to understand what this unusual request was truly about. When Emma arrived at the restaurant, it felt like stepping into another world. The rooftop venue, overlooking the sparkling San Francisco skyline, was a picture of luxury she had only ever seen in movies. The dim lighting, soft jazz music, and clinking glasses painted a scene far removed from her daily life. William was already there, seated at a table near the glass railing. He looked effortlessly commanding in a tailored navy suit, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on her. Rising to greet her, he gestured toward the seat opposite him. "You came," he said simply, a hint of approval in his tone. Emma sat down cautiously, her hands folding nervously in her lap. "I almost didn't. I'm still not sure why I'm here." William leaned back in his chair, studying her as though weighing how much to reveal. "Let's just say, I need someone different for tonight. Someone who isn't part of this world." His cryptic response only deepened Emma's curiosity, but before she could press further, a familiar voice broke through the ambiance. "Well, well, William, who's this?" Emma turned to see a stunning blonde woman approaching the table, her designer dress and air of confidence unmistakable. Isabella Hart. Emma's presence had not gone unnoticed, and the confrontation that followed would change the course of the evening. The air at the rooftop restaurant seemed to grow heavier as Isabella Hart, William's ex-fiancée, approached their table. Her every step was deliberate, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor with an authority that turned heads. Draped in an emerald gown that shimmered under the soft lights, she exuded an aura of untouchable elegance. But her piercing gaze was fixed squarely on Emma, her expression a mix of curiosity and disdain. "William," Isabella purred, her voice smooth but laced with an edge. "I didn't realize you'd moved on so quickly. And, with someone so unique." Her eyes swept over Emma, taking in her simple black dress and modest demeanor. Emma's cheeks flushed, but she held her head high. Despite her unease, she refused to shrink under Isabella's gaze. William, however, remained calm, his lips curving into a faint, deliberate smile. "Isabella," he greeted smoothly, rising from his seat. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Clearly," Isabella replied, her tone sharp. "I thought we'd agreed to keep things civilized." William's expression didn't falter. "This is Emma Clark," he said, gesturing toward her. "She's my date tonight." Emma blinked in surprise at his words, her mind racing. Date? That hadn't been part of their brief conversation earlier. She looked up at William, but his composed expression gave nothing away. Isabella's laugh was a melodic but cold sound. Your date? Really, William? Is this some kind of joke? William's gaze hardened, the smile fading from his lips. Not at all. Emma is here because I wanted her to be. And frankly, she's a refreshing change from the superficiality I've grown accustomed to. The words cut through the tension like a blade, and for a moment, Isabella looked genuinely taken aback. But she quickly recovered, her mask of confidence slipping back into place. Emma, meanwhile, struggled to process the situation. She didn't know whether to feel flattered or humiliated, but she couldn't remain silent any longer. Taking a deep breath, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. I'm not here to compete with anyone, Emma said, meeting Isabella's gaze directly. And I'm certainly not here to be part of some game. The honesty in her words seemed to hang in the air, silencing the growing whispers around them. Even William glanced at her, a flicker of surprise in his otherwise composed demeanor. Isabella's eyes narrowed, her polished smile tightening. Well, William, I hope you know what you're doing. I always do, he replied coolly, his eyes not leaving Isabella's. As Isabella turned and strode away, the tension around the table began to ease. But for Emma, the night had only just begun. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had been drawn into something far bigger than herself. The night grew quieter as Isabella disappeared into the crowd, leaving William and Emma alone at their table. Emma felt a storm of emotions churning inside her, confusion, unease, and a flicker of defiance. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to leave without getting them. Emma leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but tinged with irritation. I'm not sure what kind of game you're playing, William, but I didn't agree to this. What's going on? William regarded her with an almost amused expression, his sharp blue eyes scanning her face as if weighing how much truth to reveal. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Emma, I brought you here because I needed someone to remind me of what's real. This world, with its facades and games, has taken a toll on me. You're different, genuine, and unafraid to speak the truth. Her brow furrowed. And what does that have to do with me sitting here, being paraded in front of your ex-fiancé? A flicker of something softer passed through William's gaze, though his tone remained composed. Isabella hurt me. She betrayed me, and she'll never admit she was wrong. I wanted to show her that I don't need her, that there are people like you who have more authenticity in one moment than she's shown in years. Emma stared at him, her frustration mounting. So, you're using me to prove a point? To make her jealous? William's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Emma shook her head, her voice laced with disappointment. You're just as superficial as the world you're trying to escape from, William. If you wanted revenge, you could have chosen someone else. I won't be a pawn in your personal drama. She rose from her seat, her resolve clear. But as she turned to leave, William's voice stopped her. Wait. There was a note of vulnerability in his tone that made her pause. Emma, he said, softer now. You're right. I've been selfish. But you've shown me something tonight. Something I didn't expect. You have strength, honesty, and a kind of grace I've never seen before. You're not just part of my plan anymore. Emma hesitated, turning back to face him. His words caught her off guard, but she remained skeptical. And what exactly do you expect from me, William? He stood slowly, his towering figure imposing but not threatening. I need your help. Marry me, not for love, not forever, but for 7 days. In those 7 days, you can walk away whenever you want, but I need to show Isabella, and maybe even myself, that I can move forward. Emma's heart raced at the absurdity of the request. 7 days? And then what? Then you're free, William replied, his voice steady. You keep being you, and I'll deal with the fallout. No strings attached. Emma crossed her arms, her expression guarded. Why should I trust you? "Because," William said, a rare sincerity in his tone, "you're the first person in a long time who's made me want to trust anyone." The church was bathed in soft light as guests filled the pews, their whispers echoing beneath the soaring arches. White roses adorned every corner, their delicate fragrance mingling with the weight of anticipation in the air. At the altar, William Royce stood tall in a perfectly tailored black suit, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. His sharp gaze was fixed forward, though a subtle tension betrayed the inner conflict he couldn't shake. Emma Clark, clad in a simple yet elegant white gown, stood at the far end of the aisle. Her steps were measured, her breath steady, though her heart raced with every beat. Her dress wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. It highlighted her natural beauty, the kind of quiet charm that required no embellishment. As she approached the altar, she caught William's eye, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed to fall away. The priest's solemn voice began the ceremony, the words blurring in William's mind as he fought to keep his composure. Then, just as the priest asked, "If anyone has reason to object to this union, speak now, or forever hold your peace," the grand doors of the church swung open with a resounding crash. All heads turned as Isabella Hart stormed into the sanctuary. She was breathtaking in a flowing designer gown, her heels clicking like thunder against the polished floor. Her flawless exterior belied the storm of emotions in her eyes. "William," she called out, her voice trembling but defiant. "Stop this wedding. This isn't right." Emma froze, her hands tightening around the bouquet. William turned slowly, his expression unreadable as Isabella marched toward him. "William," Isabella pleaded, her voice breaking, "I made a mistake. I was foolish, but I love you. Don't throw away what we had." The room was silent, save for the quiet gasps of the guests. Emma's steady gaze met William's, a silent invitation for him to make his choice. She stepped back slightly, her composure unwavering. "William," Emma said softly, her voice steady and calm, "this is your choice. Don't let anger cloud it, and don't let pride guide it. Choose what feels true to you." William looked between the two women, his mind a whirlwind. Isabella, with her fiery beauty and commanding presence, represented the life he thought he wanted. But Emma, with her quiet strength and unshakable authenticity, had shown him something deeper. Taking a deep breath, he turned to Isabella. "What we had was beautiful," he said, his voice firm but laced with sadness. "But it wasn't built on trust or truth. Emma, she's shown me what those things look like." Isabella's eyes filled with tears as William turned back to Emma. His decision was clear. "Father," William said, his voice resolute, "please continue with the ceremony." The priest nodded, and as the vows were exchanged, the tension in the room dissolved. When the time came, William leaned forward, his kiss filled not with vengeance, but with gratitude and the promise of a new beginning. The warm glow of the evening sun filtered through the windows of William Royce's grand mansion as he carried Emma across the threshold. Her soft laughter filled the air as her wedding gown trailed gracefully behind them, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions that had brought them here. "You didn't have to carry me," Emma teased, her cheeks flushed. "This wasn't in the contract." William smirked, setting her gently on her feet. "True," he replied, his tone light but tinged with something deeper. "But there's something about tradition I'm starting to appreciate." Emma stepped back, her expression shifting to one of quiet seriousness. "William," she began, her voice steady, "I agreed to this marriage under certain conditions, but there's something you need to know before we go any further." William's brow furrowed, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked, stepping closer. Emma drew in a deep breath, her hands clasping together as she gathered her courage. "I'm not here to play a role in anyone's revenge," she said firmly, "and I'm not here to save you. This may have started as a contract, but if we're going to move forward, it has to be real, for both of us." William looked at her for a long moment, his sharp gaze softening. "I thought I brought you into this for one reason," he admitted. "But now I realize you've given me something I didn't know I needed. A chance to start again." Emma's lips curved into a small smile. "And what does starting again look like for you?" "Like this," William said simply, taking her hand. "No contracts, no schemes, just you and me, figuring it out together." That night, the mansion wasn't filled with grand celebrations or extravagant displays. Instead, it was quiet, intimate, a beginning built on something neither of them had expected to find: trust. Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. So, how was your day? Did something make you smile today? Or maybe something's been weighing on your heart. If you're looking for a story gentle enough to soothe you, yet deep enough to stir your soul, you've found the right spot. Today, I'm sharing a love story that didn't start with sparks or butterflies. It began with fear and a marriage no one asked for. But what grew from it was something tender, patient, and surprisingly beautiful. So sit back, relax, and let your heart wander with me for a little while. Because maybe, just maybe, you'll see love in a way you've never seen before. Elena Brooks was the kind of girl with a quiet soul, eyes that spoke more than words ever could, and a burning love for painting. She once dreamed her art would hang in a soft-lit gallery, drawing gentle applause and quiet admiration. But life, with its unpredictable turns, had other plans. At just 15, Elena's world shattered when she lost both her parents in a tragic car accident. They were on their way home from an anniversary dinner, and she never got to say goodbye. From a home filled with warmth and laughter, she was suddenly dropped into a cold, silent space. Her aunt and uncle's house. They gave her a roof, a plate at the table, and nothing more. No comfort, no kindness, just duty. She became the quiet girl in the corner. Her paintbrushes became her only friends, the only way she could truly speak. She stopped asking for affection, stopped hoping, well, almost, because deep inside, a tiny part of Elena still believed that maybe, someday, someone would look at her and see more than an obligation. They'd see her heart and stay. Time passed, and Elena grew used to the silence. She stopped waiting for affection. She just wanted peace, a quiet life with her art, away from judgment and demands. But even that turned out to be too much to ask. On her 22nd birthday, while most girls received flowers or heartfelt wishes, Elena got something else entirely. A decision. In the cold kitchen, her aunt sat upright, slid a white envelope across the table, and set it flatly. Elena sat, confused. And then, without warning, her aunt delivered the news as if it were nothing. "You're getting married, a surgeon named Nathan Hale, he's agreed." Elena went still. Nathan Hale, 42 years old. A renowned surgeon, widowed years ago in a tragic accident. He was wealthy, reserved, and so powerful he could probably buy the entire neighborhood if he felt like it. And now, he was going to be her husband. Her uncle added, "He's offering to help us out of our financial troubles. This is a good thing, Elena. Better than staying here forever like a shadow." But nothing about it felt good. All Elena felt was fear. Fear of living with a man 20 years older. Fear of being trapped in a loveless marriage. A fear of losing the last bit of herself she still held on to. She cried, she begged, she pleaded, but it didn't matter. The decision was already made. But it didn't matter. The decision was already made. 2 weeks later, Elena became a bride. In name, in photographs, and in the hollow congratulations of strangers. And then the day arrived, so fast it stole Elena's breath. The white wedding dress every girl dreams of became the most beautiful prison she had ever worn. Her skin was powdered to perfection, her hair styled into soft waves, her eyes lined with precision. Everyone said she looked like a fairy tale bride. Only she knew the truth. She wasn't walking toward a dream, she was walking into a cage. Her hands trembled around the bouquet as the grand church doors creaked open. Every head turned. She heard the gasps, the admiring whispers, the compliments. But it all felt distant, like a movie she wasn't really in. At the end of the aisle stood Nathan Hale, tall, handsome, perfectly groomed, emotionless. He looked calm, as if marrying a stranger was nothing out of the ordinary. Elena's knees nearly buckled. She wanted to run. But behind her stood her aunt and uncle, and the invisible chains they had spent years wrapping around her. When the priest asked if she took this man as her husband, time stopped. Elena looked at Nathan. His face was unreadable, not cruel, not kind, just blank. And then, in a breath that barely made it past her lips, she whispered the two words she never imagined saying like this. "I do." Those two words echoed in Elena's mind like a sentence she couldn't take back. As applause filled the church, she felt her soul drift further away. Nathan's hand gently rested on her back, guiding her down the aisle, while her heart beat like a caged bird inside her chest. Outside, the sun was setting in brilliant gold, too beautiful, too cruel, like a silent mockery of the chaos within her. The reception passed in a blur of clinking glasses and hollow congratulations. Elena sat beside Nathan like a porcelain doll, elegant, silent, hollow. He remained the perfect host, speaking to guests with a warm voice, glancing at her occasionally with unreadable eyes. And somehow that calm terrified her more. Because she knew what came next, behind closed doors. When the car pulled up to Nathan's grand estate, her palms were slick with sweat. He opened the door for her, his hand brushing the small of her back, gentle but enough to send a jolt through her. The house was massive, too quiet. Each footstep echoed in the stillness, mirroring the panic thudding in her chest. Nathan led her upstairs to the master bedroom, a golden, candlelit space that looked straight out of a magazine. She froze. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her dress. "You can change in the bathroom," Nathan said softly. "I'll wait here." She nodded and disappeared behind the door. When she emerged in a silk nightgown, he was seated on the sofa, jacket removed, collar loosened, fingers laced together in his lap. The silence between them was deafening. Elena stepped hesitantly toward the bed, unsure if her legs would hold. Nathan stood. "I'm scared," she whispered. Then, the unexpected happened. Nathan didn't move closer. He didn't touch her. Instead, he looked at her, quiet, steady, and said, "You don't have to do anything tonight, Elena. Nothing at all." She looked up, confused. "But you're my husband." "I know," he said gently, "but I'm not someone who forces." He pulled a blanket from the chair and placed it on the sofa. "You can sleep on the bed, I'll take the couch." Elena stood frozen. A strange wave of relief hit her, followed by something else, softer, warmer, like she'd just been rescued without even asking. That night, she lay in the large bed alone, listening to the wind behind the curtains and Nathan's calm, steady breathing. For the first time since the marriage, Elena didn't feel entirely trapped. And for the first time, she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end, but the beginning of something unexpected. The next morning arrived gently. Elena woke in the wide, quiet bed, soft sunlight spilling through the sheer curtains, casting golden patterns across the floor. She turned slowly, heart still heavy from everything that had happened, but something caught her eye. The sofa was empty. The blanket had been neatly folded. Nathan was gone. A strange pang bloomed in her chest, one she didn't quite understand. And then she saw it, on the bedside table, a small bouquet of pale lavender sprigs, and a handwritten note, "Wishing you a gentle morning." "Nathan," Elena picked it up, reading it over and over again, searching for something beneath the words, but there was no hidden message, just kindness, sincere and quiet. That day she wandered the estate in silence. Everything was orderly, peaceful, like him. She didn't see Nathan. But that evening, there was a small box waiting outside her bedroom door, dark chocolate tied with a purple ribbon. The next day, a hand-knitted scarf, soft lavender, just like the flowers. At first, she was suspicious. Was this some elaborate performance, a trap dressed in thoughtfulness? But what puzzled her more was that Nathan never asked anything in return. He didn't mention the gifts, never waited for her reaction, he simply left them. And each night he still slept on the sofa. Each morning the room was pristine. He moved like a quiet presence. There, but never imposing. One evening, Elena wandered into the library. The room was filled with old books and warm lamplight. Nathan sat there reading, completely absorbed, his fingers following the lines on the page. She watched him for a while before he noticed her. When he looked up, his eyes softened the moment they landed on her. "Good evening," he said, his voice calm, not surprised, not expectant, just warm enough to keep her from walking away. Elena hesitated, then asked, "Why are you doing all this for me?" Nathan closed the book and sat in silence for a moment. Then he said, "Because I want you to know you're not a debt. You're not a transaction. You're my wife, but more than that, you're a person, and you deserve to live like one." The words cut through something inside her, something she hadn't realized was still hurting. No one had ever said that to her. No one had ever seen her as anything more than a burden, until now. That night, for the first time, Elena left her room quietly, walked to the table near the sofa, and placed a note. It read simply, "Thank you." From the moment Elena left that quiet note, "Thank you," something began to shift between them. Not with words, not with sudden changes, but with silence that no longer felt heavy. The next morning, when she joined Nathan for breakfast, he simply nodded, poured her tea, and offered a soft glance, like it was the most natural thing in the world. For the first time, Elena didn't feel like an intruder in that grand house. She began to notice the little things. The chair by the fireplace always pulled out for her, the quiet way Nathan closed doors, the dinners filled with dishes she had mentioned once in passing. And then that night, the nightmares returned. This time, harsher. Screeching tires, shattering metal, red lights flashing. Alina woke, heart pounding, body drenched in sweat. She curled into herself, trembling. The door opened. Nathan entered, eyes wide with concern. "Elena?" He rushed forward, kneeling beside the bed. "What happened?" She couldn't speak. Tears ran down her face. Her breath came in shallow bursts. He didn't touch her. He just sat there, giving her space. "A car crash?" he asked gently. She nodded. "I was 15. Lost both my parents." Silence. Then Nathan's voice came. Quiet. Raw. "My wife. She died in a car crash too. Driving home after a long shift. I still remember the way the headlights hit her face. That's the last thing I saw." Alina looked up. Their eyes met. Really met. For the first time. He added, "I was the surgeon on call that night, but I wasn't fast enough. I couldn't save her." Elena's heart clenched. That kind of pain, she knew it too well. And without thinking, she reached for him. Her hand brushed his. Nathan didn't move. He let her choose. "We both lost everything that night," she whispered. Nathan nodded. "But maybe we don't have to be alone anymore." Elena leaned in, resting her head on his shoulder. In that shared silence, two broken hearts found solace, mending together in the quiet comfort of each other's presence. Elena was still resting her head on Nathan's shoulder, her breathing gradually steadying after the nightmare. In that quiet room, neither of them said another word. And somehow that silence made every emotion feel more vivid than ever. Nathan stayed right where he was, unmoving, offering himself as her place of comfort. Elena slowly turned her face, her eyes settling on his features, firm yet weary, gentle yet scarred. And for the first time, she looked at him, not as a stranger. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice barely steady. He lifted his head to look at her. "Yes?" Elena didn't answer with words. She reached out and gently touched his cheek, her fingertips brushing across his skin, as if searching for something hidden between the distance that had once separated them. "I want to," she said softly, her voice breaking slightly, heart pounding so hard it almost hurt, "not because I owe you anything, but because I trust you." Nathan didn't move. His eyes darkened, not with desire, but with quiet emotion. "Elena," he said gently, "you don't have to do anything. I promised I'd wait." "But I don't want to wait anymore," she said, her voice steadier now. "I don't want to live another day in fear. I want to begin here." At that moment, Nathan simply nodded. No rush, no pressure. It was she who pulled him closer. She was the one who kissed him first. Tentatively, trembling, but with conviction. They didn't speak again. There was no need. Every breath, every touch, closed the distance that had once felt infinite. That night, Elena didn't feel like something being given away. She felt like someone who had been chosen, loved, cherished, exactly as she was meant to be. When Elena woke the next morning, sunlight was already filtering through the curtains, casting a soft glow across her face. But it wasn't the light that made her smile. It was the warmth of the arm gently wrapped around her waist. Nathan was still asleep, his breathing slow and steady, his chest pressed lightly against her back, grounding her in a strange but calming peace. Elena turned carefully to face him. Up close, his sleeping face looked nothing like the guarded man she first met. There was tenderness now, exhaustion perhaps, but also serenity. What moved her most was how, even in sleep, he kept enough space to respect her. She didn't regret anything, not for a moment. Instead, she felt lighter, as if something inside her had finally unlocked, and for the first time in a long time, the light was beginning to come in. That day, everything felt different. Nathan didn't treat her any differently. He was still gentle, still quiet, still thoughtful. But now, when their eyes met across a room, Elena didn't look away. She smiled. And he did too. That evening, they shared dinner beneath the soft chandelier light in the grand dining room. But the silence wasn't awkward anymore. Alina spoke about her paintings, her childhood memories, the dreams she once buried deep inside. Nathan listened intently, kindly, asking questions, never interrupting. And when it was his turn, he opened up, not to revisit pain, but to let her in. He spoke about the man he used to be, a doctor who believed success was everything, until he lost his first wife and realized he didn't know how to live anymore. Alina squeezed his hand under the table, and this time Nathan squeezed back. No more walls, no more fear, just two hearts, once shattered, slowly, carefully learning to become whole again. And Alina knew she was no longer the wife forced into marriage. She was Elena, the woman Nathan chose to stay beside, and the woman who chose him too. 1 year after that night, on a quiet early spring morning, sunlight streamed gently through the window as Elena slowly stirred awake. The first thing she felt was the warmth of an arm wrapped around her waist. Nathan was still beside her, breathing steadily. But what made her heart flutter was the tiny figure nestled peacefully in his arms. Their newborn daughter. Only a few weeks old, yet she already brought with her a world of softness, brown curls, a perfect little face, and lips pursed as if dreaming of something beautiful. "She looks like you," Nathan whispered, never taking his eyes off their child. Elena smiled, her voice catching from the quiet flood of emotion. A year ago, she had believed her life was filled only with loss. Now, she was holding everything. Love, peace, a real family. Elena kissed their baby's forehead, then turned to Nathan. With tears shimmering in her eyes, she whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me, for waiting, for teaching me how to trust and how to love." Nathan gently pulled them both closer. "I stay," he murmured, "not out of duty, but because you are my home." And in that gentle, golden morning, wrapped in warmth and steady heartbeats, Alina finally knew they hadn't just found an ending, they had found their forever.